Hey, who are you? What do you want here with those two babies there under this heavy rain?
Please, we need shelter.
The rain in Seoul didn't fall, it attacked. It came down in thick, merciless sheets that turned the alleyways of Itaewon into rivers of black water and neon reflections. It was the kind of rain that washed away sins, or hid them. Kang Hyun-woo didn't believe in sins. He believed in power, in silence, in the cold, calculated language of fear, and tonight, fear had a very specific address. He stood at the entrance of a narrow alley behind Club Obsidian, his black coat cutting a sharp silhouette against the bleeding red glow of a nearby sign. At 45, Kang was the kind of man who made rooms go quiet simply by existing in them. His jaw was carved from something harder than bone. His shoulders carried decades of empire, built not with kindness, but with precision and an absolute refusal to lose. But it was his eyes that people remembered. One dark, one green, a startling, almost unnatural shade, like a gemstone pressed into the wrong face. Some said it was a curse. Others said it was a warning. His enemies said nothing at all, because men who spoke carelessly about Kang Hyun-woo had a habit of disappearing. The tattoo on his neck, a coiling black serpent that stretched from below his jaw to his collarbone, shifted subtly as he tilted his head, listening. He heard his lieutenant, Park Dajun, approach from behind. "The shipment's been delayed," Dajun said quietly. "Someone tipped off the port authority." Kang didn't flinch. "Who?" "We're looking." "Look faster." Dajun bowed slightly and stepped back. Kang turned to walk deeper into the alley, and that's when he heard it. A sound that had absolutely no business being in this part of Seoul, on this night, in this rain. Crying. Not one voice, two. Small, fragile, insistent. He stopped. Every instinct he'd sharpened over 20 years of running Seoul's most feared criminal organization told him to keep walking. Sentiment was a luxury for men who hadn't yet learned what the world truly was. He had no room for it, no patience, no interest. And yet his feet didn't move. The crying grew louder, or maybe the rain grew quieter, he couldn't tell which. He followed the sound around a rusted dumpster, past a broken fire escape, until he saw her. She was sitting on the wet ground with her back against the wall, knees pulled up, arms wrapped around two small bundles pressed against her chest. Her head was down. Her braids, long, dark, soaked through, hung like curtains around her face. She was shaking. Not from cold. From exhaustion, so deep it had become its own kind of drowning. Kang stared. She was young, very young, and she was black, her deep brown skin stark and striking in the alley's red-washed darkness, beautiful in a way that had nothing to do with where he was or what he did. She wore a thin jacket that was doing absolutely nothing against Seoul's October rain, and in her arms, wrapped in what appeared to be a single oversized hoodie split between them, were two infants. Twins. Newborn, or close enough that it made no difference. One had stopped crying and was simply staring upward with dark, glassy eyes. The other was still going, a thin, reedy sound of protest against a world it had only just met. Kang watched her for a long moment. She hadn't noticed him yet. Her lips were moving, she was talking to them, softly, in a language he didn't recognize, not Korean, not English, something else. Something with a different rhythm entirely, round and warm sounds that felt out of place in a Seoul back alley but somehow made the crying baby slow its wail to a whimper. Then she looked up. Their eyes met. And Jessica Moyo, 23 years old, 6 weeks out of Harare, Zimbabwe, with 2 bobbies she'd carried across half the world on a plan that had collapsed the moment she'd landed, did not scream, did not run, did not even flinch. She just stared at him. At the tattoo, at the green eye, at the absolute stillness of the most dangerous-looking man she had ever seen in her life. And then, with a jaw set like someone who had already survived the worst and knew this probably wasn't it, she said, in English, "I'm not moving." Kang blinked. That, in itself, was remarkable. Very few people surprised him anymore. He looked at her, really looked. The defiance in her face was genuine, not performed. She wasn't pretending to be brave. She was brave in that particular terrible way that people become when they have nothing left to lose except the things in their arms. "I can see that," he said in English. His accent was precise, clipped, the English of a man who had learned the language as a tool, not a gift. "Then keep walking," she said. Behind him, he heard Dajin's sharp intake of breath. Kang raised one hand, a single gesture, and Dajin went silent. "You're sitting in the middle of my district," Kang said calmly. "In the rain, with 2 newborns." "They're 6 weeks old," she corrected, as if the distinction mattered enormously. 6 weeks, he repeated it slowly. "Where is their father?" Something moved across her face, quick, like a shadow, and then it was gone. Sealed behind those eyes that were watching him with a wariness that had been learned, not inherited. "Not here," she said, that was all. Kang looked at the bobbies. One was asleep now. The other, the one that had been crying, was watching him with an expression of profound suspicion that, on a 6-week-old face, was almost absurd. Almost. "You have somewhere to go?" he asked. She hesitated, and that hesitation, that single, fractional pause where the mask slipped just enough to show the terror underneath, told him everything. "I'm fine," she said. She is not fine, Kang thought. He should walk away. He had a traitor to find, a shipment to salvage, and an empire to protect. He had lieutenants watching him right now, trying to read what this moment meant for the hierarchy of power they all lived inside. Showing softness was not an option he'd exercised in years. He crouched down to her level. She tensed, her arms tightening around the twins, but she didn't back away. She held his gaze. Green eye and dark eye both, steady and unblinking. "What's your name?" he asked. Another pause, then, "Jessica." "Jessica," he said at once like he was filing it somewhere. "I'm Kang." "I didn't ask," she said. And despite everything, despite the rain, the traitor, the shipment, the watching eyes of his men, something in Kang Hyun-woo's chest moved. Not warmth, not exactly. Something older and more dangerous than warmth. Recognition. He stood up, looked at Dajin. "Get the car," he said. "Sir." "Get the car." He looked back down at Jessica, who was already shaking her head. "I'm not going anywhere with you," she said. "You're sitting in the rain with 2 infants in a neighborhood that will swallow you whole by midnight," he said. "You have 2 choices. Get in the car, or don't." She stared at him. The rain hammered down. One of the twins, the suspicious one, made a small sound. Jessica looked down at them, and in that look was every calculation a mother makes when survival stops being about herself. She looked back up at Kang. "If you touch my children," she said, low and even and absolute, "I will find a way to make you regret it. I don't care who you are." Kang looked at her for a long moment. "Noted," he said. What Kang didn't know, what he couldn't have known, standing in that alley with rain pouring off his coat and a woman staring at him like he was the last door between her children and the dark, was that Jessica Moyo was not simply a stranger. She was the daughter of Ezekiel Moyo, the one man in the world whose name made Kang Hyun-woo's blood run cold. His greatest rival, his oldest enemy. The man who had sworn, 7 years ago, to destroy everything Kang had ever built. And his daughter had just looked Kang in the eye and told him she wasn't afraid. She had no idea she was sitting in the lion's den. And the lion had no idea he'd just let the enemy's blood into his home. Kang's compound sat behind walls that didn't appear on any city map. It existed in that particular layer of Seoul that only the truly powerful or the truly damned ever got to see. 3 stories of dark stone and steel and silence, surrounded by cameras that never blinked and men who never slept. The kind of place that swallowed people whole and gave nothing back. Jessica sat in the back of the black SUV and said nothing. She held both twins against her chest, one in each arm, and watched the city blur past the tinted windows with eyes that were calculating everything. Every turn, every landmark, every possible exit. She had grown up in Harare memorizing escape routes before she even knew why. Her father had taught her that. Always know how to leave a room, he'd said, before she'd understood what kind of man gave that kind of advice to a 12-year-old girl. She understood now. She understood a great deal of things now that she wished she didn't. The car stopped. Dajin opened her door without a word. She stepped out into an underground garage that smelled of motor oil and expensive leather, and found Kang already waiting, hands in his coat pockets, green eye catching the fluorescent light in a way that made it look almost alive. He watched her step out with both bobbies and said nothing about the fact that she needed no help. No stumble. No adjustment. She rose from that car seat smooth and balanced, twins secured, chin level, like she'd been carrying the weight of 2 lives for much longer than 6 weeks. Because she had been, something in his gut noted quietly. "This way," he said. They put her in a room on the 2nd floor. It was not a cell, she made that assessment in under 4 seconds. The door had no outside lock. The window looked over a courtyard. There was a bed, a bathroom, a small table, and someone had already placed 2 folded blankets on the mattress, soft ones, clearly pulled from somewhere other than a supply closet. She looked at Kang. He was leaning in the doorway, watching her examine the room the way a general examines terrain. "Bathroom has everything you need," he said. "Someone will bring food." "I don't eat food from people I don't trust," she said. "Then you'll be hungry." "I've been hungry before." He studied her. "How long have you been in Seoul?" "Long enough." "That's not an answer." "It wasn't really a question," she said. "It was an investigation, and I didn't agree to be investigated." The corner of his mouth shifted, barely. Not quite a smile. Something that lived in the same neighborhood as one. "Sleep," he said. "We'll talk in the morning." "We'll talk now," she said. "Or I walk out that door with my children and you can pretend this alley never happened." Silence. His eyes settled on her, both of them, the dark and the green, and she held the stare the way her father had taught her to hold a stare. Like it costs you nothing. Like blinking is a choice you simply haven't made yet. Kang stepped inside the room and closed the door behind him. "Why are you in Seoul?" he asked. "Why did you bring me here?" she countered. "I asked first." "I'm not one of your men," she said. "Rank doesn't work on me." Another pause, and then, genuinely unexpected, Kang pulled out the chair from the small table and sat down, not in a power stance, not looming, just sat, like a man who had decided, for reasons he hadn't fully examined, to have an actual conversation. Jessica remained standing. The twins were asleep now, finally surrendered to exhaustion, their small faces pressed against her chest in total, fragile peace. "I came for someone," she said finally, carefully, giving him the smallest slice of truth. "He's here in Seoul, he owes me something." "A man." "An obligation," she corrected. Kang nodded slowly, "And the children's father." Her jaw tightened. "Is not the person I'm looking for." He didn't push. She noted that. Most men pushed. "Your accent," he said instead. "Zimbabwe." She blinked, the first real surprise she'd shown him. "Yes." "I've done business in Harare," he said simply, as if it was nothing, as if the word Harare hadn't just detonated something small and cold in the center of her chest. "Small world," she said, keeping her voice completely flat. "Smaller than people think," he said, watching her. "What's your family name, Jessica?" And there it was. The question she'd been waiting for since the alley. She'd known it was coming. She'd spent the entire car ride preparing for it, building the answer like a wall, smooth and seamless, and giving nothing away. "Moyo," she said. "Jessica Moyo." She watched his face. She watched for the flicker, the recognition, the shift in posture that would tell her whether she was standing in front of a man who knew her father's name, or a man she could still lie to. What she saw instead was stillness. Total, absolute practice stillness. The kind that didn't come from ignorance. The kind that came from 20 years of never letting your face betray your mind. Kang Hyun-woo looked at Jessica Moyo and her sleeping twins and revealed absolutely nothing. But behind those eyes, behind the green one especially, which had always been the more honest of the two whether he liked it or not. Something enormous and dangerous and irreversible had just detonated. Moyo. Ezekiel Moyo's daughter. In his house, in his room, with 2 children in her arms. He stood up slowly, smoothed the front of his coat, looked at her one last time with an expression she couldn't read and wasn't meant to. "Get some rest," he said. And he walked out. He found Dajan in the operations room on the ground floor, surrounded by monitors and the quiet hum of men working through the night. Dajan looked up and immediately read something in Kang's face that made him straighten. "Sir." Kang closed the door behind him. "The woman," he said quietly. "Run her name, Jessica Moyo, Zimbabwean national, mid-20s. He paused. "Connect it to Ezekiel." The room went very still. Dajan stared at him. "Ezekiel Moyo." "Run it," Kang said. Calm, absolute. The voice of a man giving an order he's already certain about. Dajan turned to the keyboard. His fingers moved fast, the movements of someone who had learned that hesitation around Kang was its own form of failure. Databases opened. Cross-references compiled. Shipping records, immigration entries, financial threads pulled from 3 different continents. It took 11 minutes. Dajan's face, when he turned around, said everything. "She's his," Dajan said. "Oldest daughter, born to a Zimbabwean mother. Kang's records show Ezekiel had a relationship in Harare in his early years before he built the network. The daughter was raised by the mother, mostly off-grid. She entered South Korea on a student visa 8 months ago, then crossed into Seoul under a different name 6 weeks back." He paused. "The same week the twins were born." Kang stood at the window, looking out at the dark courtyard. "The children's father?" he asked. Dajan hesitated. "Dajan." "The birth records list no father," Dajan said carefully. "But the hospital intake forms she filed in Busan, she listed emergency contact as a Korean national." Another pause. "The name is Lee Taesung." Kang turned from the window. "Lee Taesung. Lieutenant, inner circle, his inner circle. A man Kang had trusted for 6 years, who had apparently spent at least some of that time fathering children with Ezekiel Moyo's daughter, and telling no one. The silence in the operations room was the kind that men didn't break unless they wanted to test whether they still had a future. Kang walked to the door. "Find Lee Taesung," he said. "Quietly, don't touch him, don't speak to him, just find him and confirm his location." "And the woman?" Dajan asked. Kang's hand rested on the door frame. The serpent tattoo along his neck seemed to shift in the low light. "She stays," he said. "Sir, she's Ezekiel's." "I know what she is," Kang said, quietly, finally, with the weight of a man who had just looked at a situation and understood that it was the kind that changed everything if he let it, if he didn't. He was not yet certain which way he intended to fall. "She stays," he repeated, "and no one speaks her name outside this room." He walked out. Upstairs, in the room with the soft blankets and the unlocked door, Jessica Moyo lay on her back with one twin on each side of her, both sleeping soundly for the first time since they'd been born. Her eyes were wide open, staring at the ceiling. She was not sleeping. She was thinking about the way Kang's face had gone completely still when she'd said her last name. She was thinking about what that stillness meant. And she was thinking about her father, about Ezekiel Moyo, the man who ran half of southern Africa's underground networks, the man who had sent her to Seoul with instructions she hadn't fully understood, to find something he hadn't fully explained. "Get close," he'd said. "Find what Kang is hiding. Come home." He hadn't told her she'd be 6 weeks postpartum when she arrived. He hadn't told her she'd be alone. He hadn't told her that the man she was supposed to spy on would find her in an alley and bring her inside like she was something worth protecting. He hadn't told her that Kang Hyun-woo had one green eye that looked at her like it was reading sentences she hadn't written yet. One of the twins stirred. She turned her head, pressed her lips to a small, warm forehead. "I'm here," she whispered. "In Shona. I'm not going anywhere." Outside the door, she heard the quiet footstep of a guard taking his position. Inside the room, she allowed herself exactly 5 seconds of fear. Then she folded it away, closed her eyes, and began to plan. 2 floors below, Kang Hyun-woo sat alone in the dark of his private office. No lights, no screens, and for the first time in longer than he could remember, he did not know what his next move was. That, more than anything, was the most dangerous thing that had happened tonight.